Welcome back to Bronx Tales with your host back here, Bronxy B, and me, I'm Logan. Thank you guys so much for being here. As we all know, we've received about 2,800 new crime scene photos in the last 2 days, and I noticed a picture that struck me as strange. So I went and did an experiment, and the experiment looks like this. On the right-hand side, I took a 7-inch blade and I gave a mattress a sharp force injury to see what it would look like. Because as you see, there's a strange looking gouge taken out of both the sheet and the mattress in Xana's room. And I wanted to see if maybe it was a perpetrator trying to swing at one of the victims and missing and hitting the bed. We all know Xana was down in that little corner over there in between the bed and the nightstand fighting for her absolute life. And it looks to me like a perpetrator went to swing and missed her and got the bed instead. What's interesting to me is if you all remember what the coroner, Mabbitt, said about the victim's injuries.
She says, "Sir, I don't think stabs is the right word. It was like tears, like this was a strong weapon, not like a stab." She said these things were big open gouges. She said it was quick. These weren't something where you were going to be able to call 911. They were not going to slowly bleed out.
The gouge taken out of Xana's bed, in my opinion, looks to be more like it's from a hatchet type weapon rather than a 7-inch blade. As you can see, the comparison here on the right is the mattress that I stabbed, and on the left is from Xana's room. And I couldn't help but remember what I saw stuck in the wall at Brent Kopacka's apartment when he was being swatted and eventually unalived. Now, I'm not saying Kopacka was there, but I believe that the weapon used in this instance was something more like a hatchet, an axe type weapon, or something along those lines rather than a K-bar. In my opinion, there was 3 weapons that were brought to the crime scene and used on the victims. Upstairs on the 3rd floor, I believe there was a knife used, but also a pew-pew.
They thought it was a firecracker.
Okay, so it could have been a pistol involved. Okay, so it could have been a pistol involved. Okay, so it could have been a pistol involved.
Starting search warrant right now.
Okay.
And then the last calls for you, this is the time stamp right after it happened. So at 4:21, 4:22, 4:30, she made these phone calls immediately after the bang. Immediately after the bang. Immediately after the bang.
And down on the 2nd floor, I believe there was a knife used and also a hatchet-like weapon. What I find extremely interesting in all of the photos and in this case in general is there was no blood transfer between the 2nd floor victims and the 3rd floor victims. We have a mixture of Kaylee and Maddie's red fluid. And obviously in Xana's room, we see a horrific crime scene in the mixture of Ethan and Xana. However, from victim to victim, there was no red fluid transfer. So if they want us to believe that this was a lone incel with 1 K-bar that committed each one of these unalivings, then there would be transfer from the 1st victim to the 2nd victim. there would be transfer red fluid from the first 2 victims to the 3rd victim, and so on. But we don't see that. We don't see red fluid transfer from Ethan and Xana up to Kaylee and Maddie, and we don't see it vice versa either, which tells me different weapons were used by different perpetrators. I want you to take a look at some of the vehicles that drove in the area that night. Basically, it's every vehicle that came into the neighborhood and that was caught on Ring doorbell camera footage. However, I want you to watch and I want you to listen. Just listen and tell me what you hear. Nothing, right? It's extremely strange to me that every single solitary vehicle in this footage, none of them were listening to music. None of them were listening to a podcast, playing anything through their car stereo system. I mean, considering everybody in the neighborhood and all of the other college students play their music extremely loud at all hours of the day and night. And you're trying to tell me that not one vehicle was listening to any music or anything? Because we'd be able to hear it on the Ring doorbell camera footage, and we hear nothing.
It's not just redacted, that's manipulated. You know, my wife, myself included, I'll get stuff delivered from Amazon and it shows up and I can, I get the alert, like the motion sensor, and I can hear them shuffling the package around on the ground crystal clearly. You know what I'm saying? Why do you think that it's so hard to make anything out?
Oh, because it's going to go against their narrative.
Does that maybe prove that there absolutely is audio issues here? Edited audio issues? Edited footage in general? You can hear packages being shuffled on your doorstep from a Ring camera, but zero music was caught from any vehicle. What, is every single vehicle an Uber driver and they're playing classical music really low for their passengers? Probably not. Why is it that we don't hear anything coming from any vehicle the entire night? I want to remind everybody, Ms. Potts sent a FOIA to the FBI requesting information on Bryan Kohberger. However, she was denied, and I want you to remember what the response was from the FBI when they sent her the denial letter. It said, "We can't give you this information because one or more people involved are part of WITSEC, NatSec, or CI, confidential informant." I surely hope Bryan Kohberger knows that there's an entire community out here that knows something is wrong with this case and this entire investigation, and I hope he takes action. I want us all to remember that there were several witnesses that said all of the lights were on in the house. Now, I'm not sure if when Maddie fell asleep or went to bed, she turned off her light or not, but for the most part, it's my understanding most of the lights were on in the house. So how could a perpetrator not see this sheath hanging off the edge of the bed where I believe they would more than likely be standing as they're attacking both of them? How did they not feel this being pulled off of them? And how did it even land that way? It looks like the opposite way I would think that it would land. And how does it have only a few specks of red fluid on that? It looks very much placed there and planted there, rather than it organically falling off and landing like that. Also, when the sheath came off, the way I picture it is that it happened during the fight with Kaylee. So if they want to say it was under Maddie, which we see that it's not, but they said it was under Maddie, even partially under Maddie, how would it get like that if Maddie was already asleep and then already deceased? She wouldn't have moved after that. So how would that sheath get even partially under her? The more information we receive in this case, the more pictures we get in this case, the more and more they're showing us something is very, very wrong. Something is very corrupt here. And I can only pray that the truth comes out eventually and the real unalivers are caught. But now it's very, very clear without a doubt that both Dylan and Bethany, Dylan for sure, definitely heard what was going on. Definitely heard. There is no way she did not hear what was going on. And Bethany's room is just under the living room, where tons of Kaylee's red fluid was found, where she was seemingly initially attacked. And you cannot tell me that neither of them heard anything. The lies run deep in this case. And I hope that all the three-letter agencies and Moscow understands we're going to find the truth and we're not going to stop until we do. This community is strong and I'm blessed to be a part of it because there is something very, very wrong here. And I believe they have the wrong person in prison for this crime.
Can you walk through what the different potential, I know there's a bunch, but what the potential additional relief would be, whether it's habeas corpus or some sort of post-conviction relief outside of the appellate process?
Okay, there is a direct appeal from the judgment. And here the waiver limits a lot of what he could have challenged on a direct appeal. And that has a 42-day statute or deadline, which is long past. When someone says his right to appeal has lapsed, okay, technically, yes. But that's just the beginning of what post-judgment relief there is available to him. He had a window to challenge the sentence, to reduce the sentence. That was 120 days. That's also passed. There is the Idaho post-conviction relief, which has a 1-year statute of limitations. That doesn't expire until September, I think September 3rd. And so there are some things that he can do with regard to that. Once that passes, there is also potentially federal habeas corpus procedures that he can go through. But that's only once the state remedies are exhausted.
What is federal habeas corpus?
It's generally when someone is in custody, as he would be, you can go to the federal court and say that my constitutional rights were violated in some manner. There are some limits on that, but you go to the federal court, say my constitutional rights were violated. I want you to look at this again. And they will, if the showing is sufficient enough, they can look at it and potentially reverse the conviction.
So I think the point we're trying to make just off the bat is that it really isn't over. Really isn't over. Isn't over.
I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work cause my boss is a jerk and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life cause I don't